What's up, everybody? This is Parker Hurley with the First Read Sports Show. First time back since the NFL draft. We're going to be doing episodes every once in a while when we can, talking about the NFL season now that it just kicked off on really Thursday. Week 2 just kicked off last night with the Green Bay Packers beating the Washington Commanders. So I'm going to basically, hopefully we get Aaron on a few of these episodes. I'm going to go through these week 2 games, talk about some of my week 1 reactions, hopefully get some week 2 reactions out here next week, and we can continue to build on this. But I just basically want to get my thoughts out there as I'm going to hope potentially bet on some of these games, look into some of these matchups and everything like that. So we'll start with the first game, Baltimore Ravens with the Cleveland Browns. And the first real question is just how much are the Browns going to be able to stop the Ravens at this point? You look, the biggest matchup, in my opinion, is probably the Ravens' interior offensive line. Has a lot of size to it with their 2 big guards, and then they have their very movable center that just creates massive holes for Derrick Henry in the run game. And when you add Lamar Jackson, it's obviously a huge issue. The Browns have Mason Graham, one of their main interior linemen, a little bit undersized, a rookie player at this point. They're starting Carson Schlesinger, who's basically their play caller along the interior linebacker. They have Devin Bush, somewhat of a journeyman, as their kind of 2 linebackers here. And I just see a lot of issues between whether it be Mason Graham holding up, or the communication from Schlesinger, or Bush being able to handle the speed of a guy like Lamar Jackson, or really, I think in Bush's case, it would be the power of Derrick Henry. So I think Derrick Henry is going to have, just another massive game in this one. And the question is just how much can the Cleveland Browns hang with them to stay in this one? Because honestly, I kind of think at 11 points, the spread's probably a little bit too high in favor of the Ravens. And maybe it's just deja vu from last season where they lost a heartbreaking game to the Chiefs in week 1. They get a home game in week 2 against the Raiders. Everyone thinks they're going to, blow the Raiders out. They're going to dominate this. They're 10-point favorites, and they lay an egg again because, it's kind of that saying where, you're thinking about that game and you lose 2 because you got caught up thinking about that first game. So I do think there's a chance that Baltimore could slip up here a little bit due to just coming off of a reeling loss, not being extra motivated for a Browns team that even though it's the home opener, even though it's a division rival. And then one thing I did look to is Stefanski has played Harbaugh tough in the last 10 games. Only 3 of them have gone in favor of the Ravens blowing them out in the form of over 10 points. So for the majority of the time, they keep it within 10 points, although they've consistently had the better quarterback with Lamar Jackson. So I think that the smart idea is to think that the Ravens are going to keep it close. You got Joe Flacco coming back to Baltimore for the home opener. I think he'll end up playing reasonably well. Their offensive line is okay. The Ravens have issues with their pass rush in terms of, they're starting Tavius Robinson because I'm not sure how much they trust Owe at this point, which is pretty interesting. So, and, they still have old Van Noy out there getting, the significant amount of the work. So I think the Browns pass rush can hold up well enough. I think Flacco, operated the offense against Cleveland. I think that between Harold Fannin and Dylan Sampson, they got some new additions. So I think mostly, I think Baltimore will win by like a touchdown in this game. I have it like 31-24 because, like I said, I think Baltimore can score a lot. I just think Cleveland, whether it be, coming in the back door, close at the end, or whether it be just, they hang with them throughout the entirety of the game. I think Cleveland can hang tough in this game. Another team I think can hang tough as we move to the second game is Jaguars at the Cincinnati Bengals. I think a lot of people obviously want to see the Bengals not even bounce back here because, they won, but they didn't necessarily play all that convincingly in their win over the Cleveland Browns. A lot of people talk about they start these seasons slow. I don't think that narrative went away after that first game. And I think, the biggest matchup to me is whether the Jacksonville Jaguars defensive line is legitimate or not. And they have a new defensive coordinator. And I know it's Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers, so it's not necessarily anything. I know there was a rain delay that, kind of puts everything out of whack, but the defensive line looked pretty good. And when you think about it on paper, you say, Eric Armstead's a first round pick. And then between Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen, you got 2 top 10 picks on your edges. And both of them are pretty much living up to that. You got Davon Hamilton, a pretty big guy in the interior. So I think the Jaguars' defensive line should be able to dominate the Cincinnati offensive line, especially their interior offensive line that still seems to be going through some struggles. Obviously, it was Myles Garrett, and he had a big game, but you saw guys like Alex Wright and McGuire over there on the Browns getting some pressure on them. I think Jacksonville could do a lot of the same things. And, you saw Joe Burrow getting into, when that pressure from a guy like Garrett comes, you see him start to get into those situations where, if Chase can make a hard catch or can reach out and extend, he can make those plays, and that will work for the Browns, especially against this defense that in the secondary, I think there's going to be a matchup advantage for those guys. So I don't think they're going to consistently shut them out. Especially, it's going to be interesting. What's his name? Liam Cohen, the head coach, said Travis Hunter is probably going to play a significant amount more on defense this week, and it makes sense because when you look at the Jaguars cornerbacks, especially in terms of Jerry Jones and their slot, Jordan Lewis, pretty undersized in there, which is, you got Jamar Chase is not the biggest guy, but when he plays, so much bigger than he physically is. And then T. Higgins is literally a very big cornerback. I think you're going to need Hunter to, man up on some of those guys on significant downs, or even be able to push because, okay, he mans up on, maybe you just have him man up on, Yosevas or the tight end, and then you're able to shift. Okay, now the linebacker doesn't need to worry because we're shutting him out with a cornerback, and now he can shift his coverage to now he's taking the underneath on T. Higgins. So now that cornerback can, sit back in a soft zone. And then, like I said, it makes Burrow think long enough to get the pressure. So that's where the Jaguars are going to really need to win this game. But beyond that, where I think that they're going to have their success is on offense. Trevor Lawrence, this is, in my opinion, if he doesn't cover in this game, just cover the spread, not even win. You got to cover the spread against the Cincinnati Bengals defense, or else I think that Lawrence has serious troubles. And maybe this is, I don't know what the contract is, but I would start to question what Liam Cohen, the coach, trusts in him. And Liam Cohen talked about it. Brian Thomas, I think it was 1 for 8 in terms of targets on Sunday, and Liam Cohen talked about it that, oh, we just missed this, we just missed that. Yeah, your quarterback oversailed this and your quarterback oversailed that. And Brian Thomas had one drop that would have been an outstanding catch along the sidelines, getting his toes down and everything like that. But you have an open receiver in stride and you're missing him consistently, and you're the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, and we got you Travis Hunter, and we got you, Brian Thomas, and now ETN's running for 100 yards against the Carolina offense, and Trevor Lawrence still can't make these passes. So, Cam Taylor-Britt was a liability against the Cleveland Browns. You're thinking Joe Flacco and Cedric Tillman and the Cleveland Browns and Harold Fannin can do this to him. I'm thinking Brenton Strange should have a pretty big game against these linebackers and safeties. I'm thinking Travis Hunter should probably, whether it be 6 for 70, just, working out of the slot. And then Brian Thomas, like I said, he was inches away. He had I think it was like 1 catch for 7 yards and then a rushing touchdown, which saved him in fantasy. But he was inches away from 7 catches for 150 yards and a touchdown if Lawrence would have just hit him. And now if he gets Cam Taylor-Britt in the same situation and Lawrence hits those passes, I think they could have success. I do have the Bengals winning this 26-23, but I think the Bengals are going to struggle to contain them. I think if Lawrence is able to hit the open receivers, he can win this game. I just didn't see enough from him in that first game to say, even though they are 1-0, to say, oh, I'm impressed with Trevor Lawrence. I think he has what it takes to go on the road and win a game to get them to 2-0, which in my opinion puts you in the driver's seat to make the playoffs. I don't necessarily see that from Trevor Lawrence. So I think the matchups say that, since he's going to start slow, since he's weak up front, the Jaguars could have some time to pass. I could buy it from a cover perspective. I can't buy it from a win perspective. So we'll see if I'm right about that or whether Cincy just really blows them out. So the New York Giants are on the road against the Dallas Cowboys, and the Giants coming off one of the worst. What's so funny is the team that had arguably the best vibes all offseason. Oh, the Giants, they have a quarterback now. And even if Russell Wilson isn't good, they have Jameis Winston. And even if Jameis isn't good, they have Jack. Oh, they have a quarterback. They're so stable. Good coach, good offense, good receivers, good defense. Oh, wow, they're so stable. And then they're one of the most embarrassing teams in week 1. And the questions are, is Russell Wilson going to get benched? And the Dallas Cowboys are coming off week 1 where, yes, they lost, but I think a lot of people, and I think I'd take away pretty good feeling in how this offense is going to move. And you look at the Giants and you say, they're going to win defensively up front. I just don't know if if what the Giants are bringing, I don't know if they can win up front necessarily. Abdul Carter's still playing sparingly. He should probably play a little bit more and probably will this week. But the Cowboys' defensive or offensive line pretty good against Philadelphia, who I think has a weaker defensive line, and the Giants are, they're kind of like Philly's sinking as New York is rising, but I still think Philly's defensive line is probably rated higher. So I think the Giants or the Cowboys can handle the Giants' defensive front, and it buys Dak Prescott enough time to where the Giants lean heavily on their defensive front because from linebacker, they have pretty good safety play, but from linebacker through their cornerbacks is where you can really beat them. And you have CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens and Dak Prescott, who played really well and now is at home coming off of extra time off against a defense that he knows pretty well. And against, like I said, they should hopefully beat them up front. Washington doesn't have a very good defensive front, and yet they were able to beat up New York pretty consistently. And that's a big issue, especially due to the fact that Andrew Thomas, one of the best left tackles in the NFL and really the anchor of the Giants offensive line, looks like he's out for a second week. So to the Cowboys, Sam Williams, Donovan E. from Boston College, do you have enough to make Andrew Thomas pay? Not necessarily. Do the Giants have enough to where they can afford Russell Wilson the time to where he can pick apart a Cowboys defense who, they're out Deron Bland, but they're starting to get Trayvon Diggs back. He played sparingly in week 1, but you would assume that on high leveraged third downs, you would see Trayvon Diggs on Malik Neighbors. So I think the Giants offense, that interior offensive line, I don't see them getting a run, any support in the run game. I see if Dallas can get a few big passes to Lamb and Pickens and they can put up 14 points, and it's going to force the Giants into situations where they don't trust their run game and they're going to have to pass the football, I think that's where they're going to struggle. And I have it 24-10 Dallas, and hopefully the Giants offense shows anything here, but I have Dallas rolling in this one. So another interesting one is the Detroit Lions hosting the Chicago Bears. And I'm really interested to see how Caleb Williams plays in this game. I thought in bits and spurts, he played the two things that I thought Caleb Williams really struggled with, aside from scheme, aside from playmakers, aside from, all the blame game, is I thought that he took far too many sacks when he was under pressure. Okay, the pressure being so significant is not his fault, but him taking so many sacks when he's under pressure is. And he was not accurate, especially when throwing deep down the football field. He was really good at avoiding sacks in this game, but he was very bad at his accuracy. So, he kind of checked one box, didn't check the other. And he started off hot. One of the plays were schemed. It looked almost as if Brian Flores was sitting back and was going to see what Ben Johnson's first move was, let him make his move, and now I'm going to react to it. And that's why it seemed like the first half, I remember thinking, Brian Flores is like Mr. Blitz, Mr. Light him up, Mr. I'm going to make Caleb Williams think. And it seemed like Caleb Williams was just being asked to operate the scheme, and he, started 10 for 10. It was a lot of easy passes and things like that. But then it seemed as he understood what Johnson wanted to do with his offense, Flores came into the second half and started to light him up. And that's when Williams started to get jittery in the pocket. And that's when the accuracy wanes, is when he starts to, move off of his spots. The question to me now is that, is Detroit a team that can do this? They're weak up front, in my opinion. They're leaning heavily on their front four. They don't have any depth behind their front four. So, Aiden is obviously very good, but they have, across from him is Davenport coming off an injury. Tyleik Williams is a rookie, and he's playing, real significant snaps because they're injured up front beyond, their front four there. So they have, two good players, two question mark players. One of them's a rookie. Can they, as the game went on, Minnesota was able to get more pressure on Chicago. I almost see this as the game goes on, will Detroit be the one who wears down over this? I don't think Chicago can run the ball, which is going to make it tough. And I still wonder about Caleb Williams. I think Ben Johnson is, licking at the lips to dominate this game. This is his old team. He knows the defensive coordinator. He knows the offensive play caller. He's sharing all the secrets. He thinks he was the brains of the operation. Dan Campbell was the culture, but Ben Johnson was the brains here. And they lost the brains in their defensive coordinator. He's coaching the Jets now. So I think Ben Johnson thinks that he can, get guys open and scheme this one up. And if Caleb Williams is just accurate, we're going to put 20 something points on them. And now it's just, can our defense hang in this one? And I think necessarily they can. The Detroit Lions, Green Bay looks like they're going to be the real deal on defense, and they're going to beat up a lot of teams interiorly. But when you think about the Detroit Lions, Graham Gaskell sliding into center. They have Mahogany at left guard, second-year kid, first-year starting. Ratledge at right guard, first-year rookie. Those are three new starters along their interior defensive line, and they're still figuring some things out. So I wonder if they're going to struggle in this game, and they're still, new offensive coordinator. Is this offense as high-powered as it used to be? The biggest thing for me is the interior, the status of the cornerbacks, Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon. Want to know what those two are up to. If those two are in, you could see Chicago win this game. If those two aren't, I would almost – Detroit's like 6-point favorites. I think it's giving Detroit the respect of who they were, but I don't know if Detroit is who they were. And I still think Chicago got hit in the mouth by JJ and Brian Flores in the second half, but I still think Chicago showed in that first half that they can throw a punch or two. So I think Chicago's going to throw a punch or two. If Detroit bites back, I could see it, but I think Chicago covers. I think Detroit maybe wins this like 24-23. Is when I went through my projection, what I came out with. So let me know if I'm wrong on any of these. Leave comments and tell me where I'm wrong about any of this analysis. So the New England Patriots at the Miami Dolphins. I like Drake May. I want him to do well. I thought that he was still a little too antsy and sporadic, and he sprayed the ball too often against the Raiders defense, who has significant holes in their secondary. And that's what has me saying that, this Miami Dolphins secondary, talk about the worst secondary going in the NFL right now. It's almost a good thing. Rasul Douglas seems like he's probably a step slow these days, but their Storm Duck was starting ahead of him. Is it better to have Storm Duck or Rasul Douglas? At least Rasul Douglas is a veteran. Jason Marshall in the slot, rookie, was playing outside at Florida last year. Problems, their secondary just isn't going to get the job done. Their linebackers, Tyrell Dodson, a lot of just awful stuff on tape that he was putting out there. So, New England should be able to, put up points the way that what's their names did, the Indianapolis Colts did. But I know it was raining. I know it's a new scheme for Drake May. The offensive line, you got a rookie left tackle who was pretty good for the most part. You got a rookie left guard. Your center wasn't here last year. He's a free agent. You're shuffling just a lot of things along the offensive line. Diggs is a new skill player. All these things are changing. Or Trayvon Henderson's getting into it. So but I just didn't see enough to say, oh, he's going to come in and take advantage of this Miami defense the way that Daniel Jones did, which is what makes it unfortunate, and which is why Miami is still a 1-point favorite, despite the fact that they looked like the worst team in the NFL last week. And I think that's one of the things, is that I think the perception is so low on Miami, but I think we're going to walk away from this week saying that, Miami is probably going to be a 6 or 7 win team, in my opinion, but maybe they're not, this embarrassment quite yet. Maybe they can still hold their own, and maybe Tua isn't, Tua looked awful. Tua was really bad, but, it was a defense that, they're a new, Lou Anarumo's a new coordinator. They signed, a new corner. They signed a new safety. Maybe the Colts are a little bit better. Maybe they just came out and surprised them a little bit. Tua just started, an interception and a fumble, and then all of a sudden the tides are turned against you, and you're playing a completely different style of football than you've ever played before. The Patriots, the other thing is that their defensive coordinator seems like he's out for this game, and then Christian Gonzalez is probably out for this game. So, is Vrabel going to be calling the plays? What are they going to be doing? What's their defensive identity? I do think, Miami has a backup right guard and a backup right tackle, which is why I'm not necessarily betting on Miami at this point. But I think with Christian Gonzalez out, and Jalen Hawkins had a really bad game, and Craig Woodson's a rookie, their safeties, against Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you just think that, Miami should be able to score enough points at home with their their season is on the line here. Mike McDaniel's job is on the line in week 2. I think he's going to show out at least, I have them winning 20-17 against a potentially bad Patriots team. And like I said, Drake May potentially, maybe in week 9, we're going to say, okay, Drake May's finding his own. But I think in week 2, maybe the move is to bet against Drake May, even though he's playing against bad defenses like the Raiders, and the Miami Dolphins. Now, maybe the move is to not trust Drake May to, light these teams up. So I think Miami's going to win this game. I think, like I said, New England should win up front. They should be able to defensively get push on the Miami offensive line. But so I have the under to 20-17. The Miami Dolphins in this one. So the 49ers at the Saints. 49ers, this is such a classic Kyle Shanahan game that it seems like Shanahan just loves the oh, you guys doubt me role. You guys don't think I can do this. You guys don't think I can win with this sort of thing. And I highlighted, I thought one of the funniest things, Kyle Shanahan, Brock Purdy's going to be out for this game, obviously. George Kittle's going to be out for this game. They're still 3.5-point favorites. I think they're going to get the job done for sure in this week against the New Orleans Saints. Because, I think if you break it down, Mac Jones is probably better than Spencer Rattler, right? If we're being serious about this. And I think, Kyle Shanahan's better than Kellen Moore. Robert Saleh is the best defensive coordinator. So the 49ers probably they certainly have the better offensive play caller. They certainly have the better defensive play caller. And I would say pretty affirmatively that they have the better quarterback, even though Spencer Rattler looked okay against the Arizona Cardinals in his first week. I think he's going to look a little bit different against Robert Saleh and what he brings up front. He brings a little more toughness, whereas the Cardinals are a little more finesse in terms of their defense. So, but yeah, like I said, I think Shanahan loves this spot. I talked about, he's the guy who drafted Kirk Cousins when he had Robert Griffin drafted 2nd overall and he wanted to prove it with Kirk Cousins, and he fought for Kirk Cousins, and he even wanted to sign Kirk Cousins with the San Francisco 49ers, but who would he rather have gone with? The backup at the New England Patriots. He wanted backup Jimmy Garoppolo to be his man. And then the next thing you know, when Jimmy Garoppolo isn't the man, it's not Trey Lance with the 3rd overall pick. It's his backup, Brock Purdy. So now, and even before then, when it was Jimmy Garoppolo, Nick Mullins had like a 3-game run where he was just lighting the world on fire in Shanahan's offense, just showing that a lot of people can operate the Shanahan scheme to success. And then, Brock Purdy ended up replacing Trey Lance. So it seems like Shanahan is very good with backup quarterbacks, and he has won games. He's won games with Brian Hoyer. He's won games with Johnny Manziel. So, that's really hard to do. So Kyle Shanahan is good with backup quarterbacks. The biggest thing in my thing is Fuaga, the right tackle, had a knee injury, was getting just destroyed on Sunday. And if he's participating or he's limited in practice, which shows that it's still affecting him. If he plays, he gets Bosa. I think Bosa is going to dominate him in that stretch. And I just don't think Arizona had anybody like a Bosa who can just end drives and, have Rattler throw balls up in the air for turnover-worthy plays and things like that. I think San Francisco is going to create more turnover-worthy plays from Rattler, who I quoted, he had a 7% sack rate pressure to sack rate against the Cardinals, 22% for his career. I think his pressure to sack rate gets closer back to 22% against the 49ers. So I think Rattler struggles in this game. Bosa dominates on that weaker offensive lineman, because even if Fuaga's out, it's, Asim Richards, who was about to get cut by the Cowboys last week, or about a month ago. He was about to get cut by the Cowboys, and now he's going to start against Nick Bosa. That's a problem. So Ricky Pearsall against the Saints secondary is the biggest thing that I'm looking for. Demario Davis should have a pretty good game against Christian McCaffrey. They should load up the box and force Mac Jones to beat them. I just think that Shanahan can scheme up enough especially to Ricky Pearsall, who had 4 for 108, and he had 2 catches on the opening drive, which led to a touchdown. He had 1 catch on the field goal drive, and then he had 1 catch on the final game-winning touchdown drive, all of them 20 yards plus. So 4 catches, all of them 20 yards plus, all of them put them into scoring range. I think he's the one that does it. And they got Kool-Aid McKinstry had a pretty decent game. I think he's starting to come into his own, but Isaac Yiadom struggles. So I think Ricky Pearsall beats up Isaac Yiadom, and the 49ers roll in this one 24-13. So I got them winning and covering. Bills versus Jets. Interesting spot for the Bills because it is a division game. But first off, it's a road game, which makes it even tougher. Second off, you went from the Baltimore Ravens 41-40, backs against the wall, down by 16 late in the game, coming back to win the game and everything like that. really impressive. But, what an emotional high you're coming off of on a short week. And now next week they play on Thursday night football against the Miami Dolphins, another division rival, but it's at home. So, I mean, this is a tough spot for the Bills, even though, I mean, especially because it's a division game, because that just shows, the Jets are 0-1 coming off of a devastating loss. They're going to really need this game. Their new head coach is going to be just pushing and pushing and pushing. And, they're going to come into this game like, everything's on the line here. And for the Bills, coming off of a game where everything was on the line and going into a game where it almost feels a little more significant. It's a short week. It's a home game against a division rival. You have to take care of business in that game. Those two games were so much more important for Buffalo than this game, and this game is everything for the New York Jets. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think the Jets could have some success here. Justin Fields, you could blame a lot of the run success on the Steelers defense. You could say a lot of the passing success is Fields was a little more accurate in this scheme or whatever, maybe with some time off or whatever it was. He's a little more accurate than he typically has been. So, the Bills are going to be out Ed Oliver in this game. It looks like they're still going to be out Harrison and Tre'Davious White. So they're going to be playing Dorian Strong, their 5th-round cornerback. They're going to be weak in their secondary here. So I think, Garrett Wilson could have another touchdown here. And Justin Fields, it's going to be hard for them to, contain what he can do as a dual threat quarterback as long as they consistently let him loose as that sort of player. And, it could bite them in the butt in terms of, Fields is going to make those turnovers. Fields, one of the biggest things, and it was almost eerily similar to his like first or second year or I think it was his second year in the NFL, where he would just, he would play really well through 3 quarters, and then he would just stall out in the 4th quarter, and he'd have a chance to have a game-winning drive, and he just wouldn't come through. And that's what he did consistently for his second NFL season. So it almost looked like that was going to be the case for the Jets. So I could see the Jets having some success this week against the Bills defense, especially with how weakened they are due to injuries. So, and I mean, the Jets should be able to run the ball consistently because Fields just it's so tough. I mean, they have 2 really good tackles drafted really high. They have, one offensive lineman who was drafted really high. They have 2 other guys, who are signed at least, and I mean, John Simpson was signed for, some decent money. So, I mean, they have a good offensive line, and you have, Breece Hall, who runs a 4-3. You have Justin Fields, who maybe runs a 4-3, and they're going different directions. It's tough. It's a tough scheme to defend on its own. When you add in if Fields can actually pass the ball, then they're going to be able to score points on anybody. The thing is, I mean, their defense just didn't look very good either. Brandon Stevens, number 2 cornerback, big problem. You assume if Sauce is on, if Sauce is on Coleman, then maybe you think, whether it be Khalil Shakir, whether it be Josh Palmer, whether it be the tight ends, they have big games. If Sauce just plays his side, Coleman could have another big game. You just assume that Buffalo can kind of go back and forth with them, but you wonder how many stops Buffalo can get. So I do have Buffalo winning this game, coming out on the other side with just eking by, though. I think it's going to be really close and maybe come down to a last-second field goal. So if I were looking into it, I would bet on the Jets to cover and maybe look into the over in this game. Seattle Seahawks, Pittsburgh Steelers. I think it's going to be really interesting to see if the Seattle Seahawks can run the ball. Like I said, how much of it was that Justin Fields in that scheme and having to account for him and then being faked out by him and then having wide open holes because everyone's running left and now the ball's going right. How much of it was that versus how much of it was, Pittsburgh's without Derek Harmon. Keanu Benton looks like he's, stalled out in terms of his progress. And then, with Loudermilk and Black, the backups, they're just getting beat physically up front, and it was opening a lot of those holes. If that's the case, Seattle's going to be able to run the ball consistently. Seattle invested in their offensive line. They have their 2 tackles are healthy. Gray Zabel in the first round. They went out and signed or hired Kubiak to be their offensive coordinator, coming from that, Shanahan type scheme, outside zone. Didn't show well in that first week, but he faced Robert Saleh, who has basically for his entire life faced, and I mean, he was in the same room with Kubiak at times in his life, and he's faced similar defenses or offenses to Kubiak throughout his entire career. That's who he coaches with Kyle Shanahan, who is Kubiak's, really good friend. So it was easier for them to be able to prepare for this than Pittsburgh, who may have some struggles with the outside zone, especially if Kubiak commits to it. So That's going to make it interesting, especially it seems like Harmon's going to be out again for this game for Pittsburgh. Deshaun Elliott, Joey Porter, they're going to be out. It's going to be interesting to see because you assume now that Ramsey has to play outside if Porter's going to be out. Does Ramsey follow Jackson Smith and Jigba, and then you just let whatever happens with Slay against Kupp? I would probably do that rather than, see many snaps of Slay versus Smith and Jigba. I would like to see Ramsey follow him. So I think Seattle could have at least a little bit of success moving the football. I think one of the things is that Seattle could also win up front against Pittsburgh's offensive line. I think, Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, high-paid free agent, first-round pick, they both look pretty good in their first game. And then Boye Mafe, if he takes on Broderick Jones, he's not the type of player that, it'd be a pretty good feat if Jones was able to, especially athletically, bend with a guy like Mafe. So that'll be an interesting test. I think Seattle, Mike McDonald, obviously, coming from the Baltimore Ravens, has somewhat of familiarity with, how Mike Tomlin does things. So he'll come in with an interesting, scheme, and it'll be interesting to see how they shut them down. Pittsburgh should have, some advantages in the passing game. DK, obviously a revenge game against Seattle. It's bigger than any of the Seattle cornerbacks. So you think he could have some success here. But I mean, I think Pittsburgh's going to struggle up front. I think, Aaron Rodgers, his average depth of target was under 5, despite the fact that he threw for 4 touchdowns. So he was mostly just, taking what was given and getting the ball out, to his playmakers, who were mostly open for the most part. So is it going to be the same against Seattle? I think it's going to be a lower scoring game in this one. I think Seattle could definitely cover the spread. I have Pittsburgh winning it 17-16. And it being a close game because Seattle is going to have their backs up against the wall. Coming in 0-1, I think they're going to play pretty well and bring a physical brand of football. I could just see Pittsburgh eking by potentially in this game. So the Rams against the Tennessee Titans. The Rams are in another tough spot here because they're coming off of, a home win against the Houston Texans, a former playoff team, a physical game, maybe the best defense in the NFL is the Texans. And then next week they have they're in Philadelphia for the Philadelphia Eagles, the team that ended their season. The team that pushed the Eagles the furthest last season was the Rams. So it'll, you really know the Rams really want that game. They're going to, unload the books on that game and really go all in for that game. So here's the Titans sitting at 0-1 with a rookie quarterback, a little unfamiliar. It's going to be a 1 p.m. start, which is 10 a.m. Ram time, for the people in LA who live out there. So it's going to be, a groggy start for them, not the game of all three. There's this 3-game stretch, not the game that they really are getting up for. For Tennessee, it's a game that they're going to be getting up for. They just came off of a game where they fought hard against the Denver Broncos, a playoff team. They pushed them to the very end. You're thinking, they're going to say, hey, we can fight with the Broncos, who people were predicting to win the Super Bowl in Denver in September with the altitude. It's really hard to do that. We still have a shot here at 0-1. That's going to be this, sentiment in Tennessee. You think, Big Jeff Simmons, Sebastian Joseph, Tavondre Sweat, can they win up front against the Rams? Should be out both of their starting guards, Dotson and Avila. So you think, Tennessee can start to win up front here. The Rams start to get off to a slow start here. Can Tennessee just really kind of score anything here? You're thinking, okay, they struggled on offense last week, but they were facing Denver. Like I said, arguably the best defense in the NFL. It's going to be tough to consistently beat that if you're the Tennessee Titans, especially your first start in the NFL for Cam Ward. Ward at least showed flashes. He took too many sacks. He's still his I think terms like arm arrogance. His arm arrogance, like he believes he can make every throw, which can hurt him at times. It can help him at times. So it's a mixed bag, and I think it adds that layer of variability that makes you think, if he connects on a few of these big passes and all of a sudden the Rams are in the East Coast and they're starting slow and it's 2-3 and outs, and the next thing it's 10-0 Titans, is this one of those games where, the Rams get off to a slow start? So I like the Rams. I think that they could find a way to win this game. But 5.5 is a lot on the road against a Titans team that, like I said, just pushed Denver, in Denver, and is going to be coming back more motivated now to show themselves at home. So I have Tennessee covering this spread. I said 21-20 Rams. I have the Rams eking by here. Like I said, I could see it being 10-0 Rams or Tennessee early. And then, the Rams get a touchdown right before the half, and then they get the ball at the half and it's 14-10. And then Tennessee comes back and it's, 14-13. And they're just into that little, fight fight towards the end of the game there. That's totally what I could see happening in that game. Panthers against the Cardinals. Panthers going to be having their back against the wall. I just struggle to, get behind what's going on in Carolina. Especially it's going to be tough for Bryce Young. He just doesn't look like he has it. Like I said, the Jacksonville defense, maybe they are a little bit better than you think they are, but Young just sometimes he needs to be one of the most precise quarterbacks in the NFL to overcome his physical limitations. He's not nearly accurate enough, and he doesn't read the field nearly well enough. At Alabama, a lot of his plays were improvisational, which like Tua is a little bit physically limited, but he can at least get by in terms of, this is what year in the NFL, because he's precise and he moves quickly enough, and he's pinpoint with a lot of his placement. So he doesn't miss the layups, and he doesn't miss the easy ones that can get him by. Bryce Young is just too inaccurate and too much of a thinking that he can be, a Baker Mayfield type. And he can't, and it causes him to do too much. They're going to need to lean on the run heavily in this game. Arizona does not like to play linebackers because they don't have any. They have Mac Wilson and Davis Gaither. They're both awful. And so they try and get those dudes off the field as much as possible, which comes into 6 DB looks consistently, 6 defensive line fronts consistently. They're whether they want to load you up or load you up in the back, they just want to get those linebackers off the field and almost play like a college football style of defense. Can Carolina expose when they go into those 3 safety looks and they're, Jalen Thompson's in the box, when he's that extra guy in that box, can you get to him and can you run at him? And can you consistently do it? And then Darius Robinson, an undersized defensive lineman, can you run at him? When he shifts to the outside, we don't need to run at him. When he shifts to the inside, we need to attack him. Can you do that against this Cardinals defense that, is a little bit ripe for it? They're still missing too much personnel wise. They're missing just a little bit much right now. They don't have enough sand in their pants to, but can Carolina be that team? Can Chuba Hubbard rip off 100+ yards in this game? That's what I'd be looking for if I was Carolina. Can Chuba Hubbard just grind these guys to a wilt? Because Carolina or Arizona, I know Kyler Murray was sick last week, but he looked still like he just doesn't have that, ability to take that next step, whether it's taking stupid sacks, whether it's inaccurate passes, whether it's not setting his feet because he has to shift in the pocket, not move, even shift. And then he doesn't set his feet because he's throwing, and it just misses just a little bit. He can't have these consistent misses like that. It's just not going to work. JC Horn on Marvin Harrison will be really interesting. I think Trey McBride is going to have a really big game. The reason I can't bet on the Carolina Panthers is that I just don't think, aside from JC Horn, and Derek Brown, who on their defense, they already lost to Sean Wharton. Their edge rushers are awful. They have no sense of edge pressure right now. And their linebackers are terrible. So I think Trey McBride could just destroy, especially, they don't have a slot cornerback even. Charles Smith-Wade is, I think, who they're starting. So I think Carolina has a shot, but I would not bet on it. I would even probably take Cardinals to cover if I had to, like in a pick'em spread. Denver Broncos at the Colts. I like Denver in this spot. I think, coming off of, like I said, a game against Tennessee where, they didn't play necessarily their best. Now Indianapolis is coming off of, where Tua just completely melted down and had, a brain fart after brain fart. They looked terrible. Dolphins defense was wide open. You're going from that Dolphins defense where, we're laughing at who's starting in cornerback to, PS2 is going to be following Pittman. Riley Moss is going to be following Pierce. McMillan's going to be right on Joshua Downs. And then you have Barron, who's like a 4th cornerback who doesn't even play much because they're so loaded at cornerback. And they match up so stylistically with this Indianapolis Colts defense. Daniel Jones, like I said, when you're giving him play action and a pocket and guys open down the field, Daniel Jones can hit that. Even some of these passes, I wasn't impressed or blown away with what Daniel Jones was doing. I was like, yeah, we got real problems with Miami's defense. Everyone except maybe Drake May could expose, other quarterbacks, but like Rattler, but guys can't expose Miami's defense. I don't think Daniel Jones can expose Denver's defense, even at home, even if they can start to get a run game, even with improvements along the offensive line. I think let's see if those are improvements. Bortolini, the new left guard, everything like that, Goncalves, are those improvements, or did you just beat up a Miami team, who got their backs against the wall? I think Denver can beat them up front. I think, Knicks didn't play well, but And we're going to see what this Indianapolis Colts defense is about. But I think it's mainly about, Denver is going to shut down Bo Nix in a huge spot here. And they're going to, come back to proving kind of who they are defensively. And I think Nix played awful against, whoever in his first game. But I think he can come back and look at least decent in this spot. I don't think the Colts have, the edge pressure that could really, win this game. Like I said, unless they come in here and surprise me with Anarumo's defense. So I have it 21-13, Denver winning this game. I just think that, they're just, I think, like I said, you're buying low on Denver. You're selling high on Indianapolis. You're taking what you probably thought was going to happen 2 weeks ago. It's just you saw the Colts blow them out. Now you think that, Daniel Jones is some guy that you didn't think he was just 2 weeks ago. I don't think that's necessarily the case for that game. So Philadelphia Eagles at the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl rematch. Patrick Mahomes is 0-1, and Patrick Mahomes gets the team that beat him in the Super Bowl. It would be hard for me not to, lean towards Mahomes here. I already said I don't trust the Eagles defense. Milton Williams is on the Patriots. Josh Sweat is on the Cardinals. Not Derek Barr. Brandon Graham is retired. You're not nearly the same thing that you used to be along your interior defensive line, or even along your entire defensive line, because you used to be able to come in waves at people. And, now it's Ojimo who's not quite there yet. Now it's, Byron Young, who, because of Jalen Carter, was playing way too much last week. Now your edge rushers are, Jalix Hunt, and Nolan Smith has, bursts in moments, but he was a little bit better rotationally last season. You're missing a lot of that depth that's going to really bring the thing home. Taylor on the right side was terrible for the Chiefs, but Simmons on the left side was excellent. I could see, and Sua Matia looked fine at guard. The other dudes looked fine at guard and center. I could see them getting enough protection here. And their cornerback, too, is also another huge issue. They lost Slay. They're shuffling guys back there at cornerback, too. It seems like they're going to have to start Jacorian Bennett, who was not starting. It was Adoree Jackson who was just getting torched, and they brought in Bennett for a little bit. I think, Bennett, they just traded for him like 2-3 weeks ago, but they need to start Bennett. They're signing guys, they're trading guys. They do not like where their roster is. The Philadelphia Eagles don't, and neither do I. I don't think they're quite there yet. I think Dallas let them off the hook. Miles Sanders was getting into scoring range. He fumbles, storm delay, and the Eagles just sit on the ball for the rest of the game. I wasn't like, oh, wow, the Eagles really, didn't do anything impressive to me, really. A.J. Brown didn't look like he was even getting open necessarily in that game. I think, and the thing with the Chiefs is that their pass defense can struggle, and Herbert threw all over them, and Herbert looked really good. I don't know if, Jalen Hurts is just a different quarterback. They're going to lean on running the football. The Chiefs have always been a pretty good run defense, and they're probably going to be a good run defense in this situation when they load up the box and force them to throw. Can A.J. Brown and Devontae make them pay for that? For sure. But, can Patrick Mahomes make Jacorian Bennett pay, or, Reed Blankenship against Kelsey potentially? We could see that too. So I think the Chiefs, their offense looked fine to me. They didn't run the ball well. Mahomes played really, really good. Their defense struggled, their pass defense, and Jawan Taylor had an awful game. It was terrible and just cost the Chiefs consistently. And they lost Xavier Worthy on the very first play. That's hard. So, it's going to be easier to kind of adjust, this week with all of those things. Like, you don't have to adjust in game. You've already planned for this. So I do have the Chiefs winning this game, 28-24. I think it'll be a close game. Next game, Sunday Night Football, Vikings, Falcons. Falcons coming in 0-1, Sunday Night Football on the road. They need this game like crazy. I just don't see it. I don't think that they can possibly pull this one off. I think it's going to be a hard task for them. And the Minnesota Vikings, especially on defense, are really going to get after this team. If Mooney is hurt, they're playing Casey Washington. The right tackle's Elijah Wilkinson. You got issues if you're Atlanta right now. They struggled to score against a Bucs defense who had injuries, and wasn't necessarily they have bad linebacker play. They have bad cornerback play. Their pass rush isn't necessarily getting there, and they had struggles to move the ball in that situation. Penix actually looked pretty good in how he managed the pocket. And you would say, if you had a better right tackle, if you had a better run game because of, the issues along the offensive line in this situation, and if you had anybody at receiver, they're so weak at receiver right now. Other than Drake London, obviously, but if you push all the coverage over to London, you have Casey Washington. It's tough for the Falcons to consistently move the ball. And now, like I said, you have Flores, who knows a little bit more about what this offense is going to bring. and he's going to scheme, consistently for this, and he's going to put the right matchups on that right tackle, whether it be Van Ginkel or Grenard. It's going to be a tough ask for them to score a lot of points in this game. JJ McCarthy, home debut. I always liked him in college. I thought, like like a lot of the time in college football, quarterbacks, you can win despite quarterbacks a lot. Like people confuse this in college football that in the NFL, it is you either win with or win because of. Win with means that he just game manages, he gets the job done, he does what he needs to do. Win because of is, Mahomes, Lamar, Allen doing things that are beyond, what is being asked to do. They're winning games on their own. They're dragging, like I said, Jawan Taylor gets bad plays. Mahomes still has them with a game-winning drive because it doesn't matter how bad my right tackle is. It doesn't matter how bad my receivers are. Josh Allen, Keon Coleman, Josh Palmer, Khalil Shakir, these guys are probably nobodies everywhere else they go. Josh Palmer was a nobody where he went. And now he's, in this mix because of what Josh Allen brings. There's win with and win because of. In college football, there is win despite of. Like you can literally, I've seen a lot of bad, like in the NFL, bad quarterback play. I don't care who you are. Like you have to be at least a specific level of quarterback to win in the NFL. You just do. Is Joe Flacco elite? No. Was Joe Flacco good enough? Obviously. Was Andy Dalton good enough? Yes. Is he good enough to win playoff games? No. Is he good enough to be in the NFL and win with? Yes. That's, you know what I mean? Andy Dalton was amazing in college football. In college football, you could be bad, bad, bad. Michigan has had bad quarterbacks. And people just think oh, he's just another bad Michigan quarterback who they ran the ball and ran. It's no, he made passes and they won with him. Okay, they didn't win because of him, but they won with him. They didn't win despite of him, which a lot of teams in college football do that. So I think there's a difference there. I think JJ is a little bit better than people think he is. First half looked like I was just dead wrong and everyone was victory lapping and it looked pretty bad. Then he just came alive and he made a lot of good throws. And I think he has that poise. He has that confidence. He got better as the situation got tougher. That's what it seemed like you saw in Michigan too, which is, again, you're winning with guys who do that. You know what I mean? The guys who rise up to the occasion, you're winning with those. So another spotlight game for him. The Bears defense, with Dennis Allen, in that environment on the road on Monday Night Football, is probably going to be tougher than at home. It's going to be silent when he gets to, operate his system. This Falcons defense, geez, they're weak up front. They just, shuffling Doorless. They're shuffling, a bunch of weak guys up front. Leonard Floyd, these two rookies who are, both weaker against the run than they are the pass. I think Minnesota, I would lean on Jordan Mason, not Aaron Jones. I would lean on Jordan Mason. I would go downhill. I would punch you, and then I would get JJ on those rollouts, get him moving, easy to Justin Jefferson against his weak secondary, who can be exposed. Kevin O'Connell can scheme it up for him. I think JJ shook that off in the first game. I don't think he's going to, like I said, I don't think he's going to, I don't necessarily think it's a Mahomes type of thing, but I do compare it a little bit to, when they went from Alex Smith is Sam Darnold, couldn't get over the top. They had everything in place, and now they go to Mahomes and they add pieces on top of that. Their offensive line looked pretty good. If they can get Darisaw back, I think the Vikings roll in this game 23-13. I think JJ just handles his business, leans on the run game, converts his third downs. He can scramble. He can make all the passes. His biggest thing right now to me is probably he throws a lot of fastballs. He needs to just put a little touch on it. And it seemed like as the game went, his touchdown to Aaron Jones, even his first touchdown, just a little bit more touch than, the first pass was, boom, zil. That's great that you can do that. Let's just ease it down a little bit. So I think JJ will handle himself again. Vikings go 2-0. Falcons are in trouble. I mean, a primetime spot. I think at home, JJ rises to the occasion here. And they get the job done. Like I said, a pretty convincing win. I just didn't see what I wanted to see from Atlanta to say, this is a team that can go on the road and win in a tough spot with their backs against the wall. Houston Texans against the Bucs. Going to be an interesting game for the Texans here. I think that they're going to come out and play pretty well. I think that, the biggest thing for this game is that Tampa Bay played this, like I said, this Atlanta defense who's very, very soft. They have no pressure up front whatsoever. And now you get Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, who are, probably the best edge duo that there is. And you probably get the best defense there is, with Shire in the back end and Chauncey Gardner and Petrie and Stingley. And they just got guy after guy after guy. And, Lassiter's really starting to play well. You just have in TOTO, starting to play well. You just have all these freaking guys. It's really hard to play against Houston, who's going to beat you up physically consistently, which is going to be tough for Tampa Bay. They're already missing the right tackle. That's going to be a lot of Will Anderson. I mean, Will Anderson could just tee off in this game on Baker Mayfield. They really struggled in that first game against Tampa Bay here, or against Atlanta here. Really got off to a slow start. I could see the same thing, Houston's coming back from a road loss. The place is going to be going nuts. It's Monday Night Football. The crowd's going to be crazy. Will Anderson's going to be getting off the ball like crazy. They're going to be their backup right tackle. Chris Godwin's going to be out for this game. I just don't see Tampa Bay necessarily being able to overcome that on defense. The Houston offense, I mean, geez, what an unfortunate series of events for that offense, especially against the Los Angeles Rams, who I thought the Rams were going to win that game, but man, was it up for the taking in Houston. Offensive shift penalties, offensive holding penalties, false start penalties, delay of game penalties. I mean, geez, get out of your own way for 2 seconds and you could be a competent offense for once, but they weren't. So it was unfortunate. Nico Collins got locked up by Akello Witherspoon, which is pretty interesting. But even in this spot, Akello Witherspoon appears to be ascending, and the Rams asked him to follow Nico Collins because they seem to really like and they didn't do anything at cornerback because they seem to really like what he's doing. Okay. The Bucs don't have that. They just signed Zion McCollum, sure. But, between Zion and between Jamel Dean, because their rookie quarterback isn't going to be ready. Their slot got torched last week. Servassier Dennis, their linebacker, had a really bad game last week. I mean, Houston, you're at home. There can't be these communication issues. The offensive line, okay, Cam Robinson's on the left side. Ursery's on the right side. Ursery started on the left side all summer. Then you shifted it. First he was on the right side in the spring. Then he was on the left side in the summer. Now he's back on the right. Okay. 2 weeks in a row, he's on the right side. 2 weeks in a row, he's on the left side. 2 weeks in a row, Titus Howard's at guard. Now you have your center. Jake Andrews unfortunately got hurt, but you've always had a competent, it was like in Madden, it's like a 72 or a 71. Okay, your 72 got hurt, but you always had that 71, and it was 72 versus, it's not great, but it's okay, now you at least have some continuity, and now you're at home. Just get out of your own way, and I think CJ Stroud will be just fine, but can they necessarily do that? I think this game is going to be low scoring. I have it 16-9. I think the Houston defense is going to win this game on their own. I mean, they gave up 14 points on the road against the Rams offense, who looks pretty sick. The Rams offense has 2 guards that got hurt, but I mean, I think Houston's defense is going to be legit, and they're going to win this game at home and get to 1-1 here. Raiders Chargers, a really interesting game. It comes down to Brock Bowers, so I barely even want to talk about it, but I think they can push the Chargers. I think a lot of people are going to be on the Chargers bandwagon. I think, the biggest thing is that Herbert came out slinging the ball. They came out trusting him, which is different than what Greg Roman has ever really done in his NFL career. So he came out slinging the ball. It's going to be interesting to see if they do that again. Like I said, against who they even play in week 1, New England. There were passes there that May just missed. Herbert's just simply not going to miss those. So it's going to be really interesting to see, can Herbert take advantage of that? But the biggest thing to me is that they have a backup right tackle. Their left tackle, Slater, got hurt. They pushed Alt over there to left tackle. Now they got Pipkins over there, and he gets Max Crosby, and Crosby has dominated Pipkins for years. So it's going to be Pipkins on Crosby, and I think Crosby's going to dominate that matchup. It's going to force them to run the football, and then it's going to force Devin White, and the Landon Roberts, 2 really downhill linebackers. If Oakland or Las Vegas can get you in those running situations, they could be okay, but their cornerbacks are weak. And if Crosby can't tee off on this right tackle, then it's going to be a problem for them. Like I said, on the other side, I just wish I knew the Brock Bowers status. If he was in there, I would be making a case hard for, Vegas at home on Monday Night Football. Pete Carroll is a very buttoned up coach. They're not going to make these stupid mistakes. Geno was pushing the ball down the field, Trey Tucker, Dante Thornton, things of that nature. If you have Brock Bowers in there and it frees up those deep, whatever it's called, the deep long shots, wow, it could really open things up. But if Brock Bowers isn't there and all of a sudden you're sitting on the deep ball, it's going to get tougher for, can Geno Smith really pick you apart in those sort of situations consistently? We'll see about it. I think the Raiders could probably win this game. at home on Monday Night Football in a big spot with a good coach and a good quarterback. I think they'll play well. But I mean, obviously, if they don't have Bowers and then you get Herbert slinging the ball and Crosby doesn't, get home as much, then he would obviously lose that game. Hit me up. I'm at Parker Hurley. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll hopefully come back here again and do the same thing. Go through my games. Let me know if I said anything wrong. Let me know if you disagree with anything. Talk to you guys soon.